2 and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We welcome you to today's DevOps.com webinar brought to you by Techstrong and Plutora. My name is Jared Harris. I'll be your host for today's webinar. We're excited for today's panel ahead of you, but before we begin, we have a few housekeeping notes. Today's event is being recorded. You'll receive an email shortly after the webinar concludes with a link to access it. If you have any questions, we'd like for you to submit them in the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. There's also a tab where you can chat, where you can engage with other speakers and your fellow audience members. We do have a few polls today, so be sure to stick around and make sure you answer those. We also have some handouts for y'all. Go ahead and click on the handouts tab, which is also on the right side of your screen. You can get those downloaded and keep them on your computer. Finally, at the conclusion of the webinar, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around, make sure that you're here. You can claim those and get the details on how to claim those. So let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar. The new ITOps, combing SRE and VSM to power production. We're joined with Helen Beal and Dalibor Siroky. And it's my pleasure to turn the program over to you, Helen, if you'd like to get us started and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Jared, and hello, everybody. I told the audience a little bit about myself already in the public chat. We're talking about ice cream. It's very warm here in the UK, where you can probably tell I am from. I've got quite a few different roles, but I'm basically a DevOps and ways of working coach and love just talking about DevOps and all these things that relate to it, like SRE and ITSM that we're going to be talking about today. And of course, Value Stream Management. I am also chair of the Value Stream Management Consortium, so that is very much a passion topic of mine. Dalibor, tell us about you.
Sure. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plutora, and we help companies the way that they deliver software by providing visibility, transparency, and control in their software delivery process. We're a leader in the VSM category, and over the years, we've helped a lot of companies really try to introspect and think about the way that they deliver software in a changing world. My background's deeply rooted in software delivery in large companies, so I've started off as a developer, managed a delivery team, ran an architecture team, and ended up as a CIO for a bank before realizing, geez, there has to be a better way to solve this software delivery process. So I'm passionate about value stream management, passionate about anything that optimizes software delivery within larger organizations.
Perfect. I love the way you've hedged your bets on the ice cream topic with either vanilla or cookies and cream. And we've got a few of our participants that are also enjoying the cookies and cream idea. So today we're talking about SRE and ITSM, and we are talking about VSM as well. So Value Stream Management, as Dalibor and I've both said, it's something we're really passionate about. We're going to talk about the relationship between site reliability engineering, for those of you not familiar with the SRE acronym, and then we're going to contextualize that around Value Stream Management, talk about how this aligns to customer experience, and then talk about this relationship between one of these key aspects of SRE, the toil, and how that relates to ITSM. So ITSM, of course, this group of services that we use to manage the environments that run our products and the services that we're pushing out to our consumers or our clients or our business users of our software, has all these different parts to it. You know, there are more components to ITSM than we've got here, but I picked a few key ones that really matter for an SRE and for system stability. And then what you're also seeing here is kind of a DevOps picture, because DevOps really came from needing ITSM people and ITOps people to be more agile. So our software developers were embracing agile very strongly, and our ITSM people were getting a little bit left behind. So these services, they require policies and procedures, and those really closely relate to things like SLAs, SLOs, and SLIs. We're going to talk about a bit more detail later. So that's our service level agreements, objectives, and indicators. So as I said, DevOps really seeks to make ITOps more agile and to limit the amount of handoffs and delays that we have between teams, in particular the Dev and Ops teams. So Dalibor, what are the big ITSM challenges that you currently see with your customers?
Well, I think the biggest one that we've seen to date has been how do you shift left, right? I think initially, if you think about operations, it's how do you protect the integrity of the production environment, and how do you limit change has typically been the mantra. And as you shift left, you have to start to think more programmatically and be a participant rather than a participant in the process rather than a recipient of the process. And the challenges that we see is as you shift left, how do you get involved, and what are the things that need to be done to do that? So it's about understanding that structure, and that programmatic approach to the upstream activity really helps you drive the level of perfection that you can get into the production environment. So it's not just about how do I structure myself for receiving something, but how do I really move left and really be a participant in that process, and what are all the different activities that help me be a participant in that process rather than be a recipient of it. And that shift left has been the mantra for quite some time, and I think it'll continue, because that shifting left and breaking down those boundaries between the delivery, the development side and the operations side is really critical to ensuring that you get things out to the customer as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of shifting left, it really started with testing, didn't it? And then we applied it to security and really just everything, trying to get it sooner and sooner, and then really bringing these teams together. So we've contextualized Agile, we've contextualized ITSM. Now let's define SRE. So SRE is actually a little bit older than DevOps. It's just, it was started at Google as a concept, and they didn't release it into the wild, if you like, to the market until a bit after we'd already been talking about DevOps. It often feels newer, but its heritage is actually a bit older. So as I said, it comes out of Google. There are lots of books. This is the kind of original book. And there's this concept that these people, the SREs, the site reliability engineers, they spend sort of half the time doing ops stuff and half the time doing dev stuff as new features, scaling, or automation, as it says here. So I've been watching the SRE adoption in the marketplace for quite a while. We've got some ambassadors at Devops Institute and people like that are leading SRE implementations. And it's quite interesting to watch, because there seems to be quite a lot of it about, but very different patterns. So some people are having centralized SRE teams. Some people are embedding SRE into separate teams, or feature teams or product teams. But let's get Dalibor to tell us as well where he thinks the world is at with SRE adoption. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that when these things are conceptualized and you start to see them in the wild, it takes a long time for them to become mainstream. And you see that through Agile, you then see that through DevOps, and you see that through Value Stream Management and Site Reliability Engineering as well. So as you see those things, it always amazes me how much longer it takes to actually get into the wild and become mainstream. And I think things are definitely getting faster. I think Agile took a long time, and this company's still doing Agile. So I'm trying to make that transformation to become more Agile. And DevOps, I think we're saying like Agile about 30 years, DevOps 10, VSM sort of 3, and probably SRE around 5 years or something like that, or maybe even longer. But it just seems to take a long time, which is just the time that it takes to transform cultures. And I guess also as people rotate through organizations, sometimes that fresher mindset is what's needed. I think the level of adoption that we're seeing is the question of how prevalent is it? And it's always a great thing when you see a lot of companies doing case studies. You see a lot of jobs advertised, and it's very, very clear that there's way more opportunities for people than based on the roles that are available. So I think there's definitely a shortage of people that understand it. There's definitely a lot of companies that are recruiting for it, and you can see that through their job ads. What we see is that it's a fundamental part to, if you're implementing DevOps, or if you're changing the cultural aspects of the organization, that gives you the cultural framework to do that. But then fundamentally, you have to get into, okay, what are the day-to-day activities that are being performed by the teams? And we're seeing a lot of that being asked at the moment, which is, how do I actually do it? What do I do day to day? What does shift left actually mean? Where do I put my people, and what are the day-to-day activities that they're working on? And I think the companies that are doing it well are really looking at this. And I think it gets into it on the next slide here, which is around what are those detailed activities that we're doing.
And you just said, you know, what actually is shift left? And we've got a couple of questions coming in from the audience. They're in the chat, so I'm going to answer them. One of them was, what do you mean by shift left, basically? So I'm going to use my hands a bit, which is a bit confusing because I can never remember if I'm mirrored. But imagine I'm at a whiteboard and I draw out a software development life cycle step by step by step. So it starts at the left and moves over to the right, and different steps happen, and testing might be like the 6th or 7th step in. When we say shifting left, we're saying we're doing testing earlier. So we're shifting it left across the life cycle, across the board, to make sure we fail fast, we fail smart, we fail early, basically. And then same for security, same for all these other IT operations things. We're just trying to not leave them too late. And it, you know, shifting left really did start in testing. Testing is, it becomes just very expensive and time consuming to fix a problem the longer you leave it through that life cycle. So that was the first question. You kind of answered the second question as well, which was how old is DevOps considered to be? As you said, Agile sort of 30 years, DevOps about 10 years. And actually, DevOps we can trace back quite nicely to the very first DevOps days in 2009 in October in Ghent. It all came from Patrick Dubois wanting to go to a conference called Velocity and not being able to make it to that, and starting up his own conference that he chose to call DevOps. And that initial hashtag of DevOps days stuck as the DevOps movement. So a little bit of history there. This is Google's view on the relationship between SRE and DevOps. So what they're really saying is that DevOps is the practices, and SRE is the things that work to animate those practices. So we talk about silos quite a lot in DevOps. As I mentioned here, you know, DevOps is designed to break down silos. So what is the purpose, Dalibor, of breaking silos down across the IT delivery stream?
I think silos really mean that they create isolation and inconsistency in understanding. And in order to think about software delivery all the way from idea into the hands of the customer, that is I guess a cross-functional team problem, and it's also a cross-functional optimization problem. Silos create isolation, they create inconsistencies in understanding. I think they also create inconsistencies in understanding the incentive structure for different teams, particularly around development and operations. So when you have silos, you've got poor information, you've got poor communication flows, and you've got inability for people to really collaborate and participate. So that becomes a major challenge in optimizing something when you're operating with incomplete information, and potentially even information that's reluctantly or doesn't want to be shared. So when we think about that optimization problem, it's absolutely critical that those silos are broken down. I don't think you can achieve a nirvana state by having information silos. And when I say information silos, I mean sort of teams that don't communicate with each other, or even the information that those teams use not shared with each other to inform the upstream or downstream processes. So it becomes a major problem.
Yeah, we've got to keep that stuff flowing, haven't we? So yeah. If this is the relationship between DevOps and SRE, what can we infer about the relationship between DevOps and VSM?
I think it's a level of abstraction, and when we think about DevOps, and we think about DevOps as, okay, it's the culture and the practices that you have to implement. And I think the Google guys say it really well, where it's think about Google as the interface, and then think about SRE as the concrete class implementation of that, where it actually defines what you need to do, and that what you need to do is I think about the delivery problem and the things that have to happen on a regular basis in a programmatic way, so that you can program your way out of those sort of repeated activities. And I think value stream is the same thing, but on a slightly larger scale. So rather than just considering development and ops, you're considering the entire stream of responsibility between the time that you spin up an idea and it's conceptualized to the time that actually makes its way through into the hands of the customer. And you're trying to optimize across those different things. And again, there'll be concrete implementations as to what you do at each point, but you then build up this meta model which tells you what is it that you're actually optimizing for, and how you're handing off between different teams. So I think it's a similar pattern, but a high level of abstraction.
Yeah, I often talk about it being the next generation of DevOps, kind of the next evolution that expands even further. As you said, it's like going upstream, going downstream, looking at everything. I also often think of it as DevOps being the toolkit of practices that implement what we're trying to achieve in VSM. So almost VSM replacing DevOps and DevOps replacing SRE in this kind of way that Google have positioned these two. We've got another question from the audience, which is quite a complex and interesting one that I like to tussle with as well. If DevOps teams should own what they build and therefore they should also be responsible for reliability, why do we extract the reliability into SRE teams? So a little bit earlier, I said that there's different patterns that I'm seeing in terms of implementation. And some people are doing a centralized SRE team. You know, we used to see DevOps teams, thankfully, a pattern that decreases a little bit more. So when we're saying DevOps teams here, we're going to assume that we mean the pattern where we've got a multifunctional autonomous team, not the one team in the organization that's allowed to practice DevOps. And I'm going to imply or assume that's implied because of the way that the question is set up with the you build it, you own it, Werner Vogel's statement, which I like to say, we build it, we run it, to make it more ownership, and also that, you know, it's wider than just running it. So I will get around to answering the question. I think the pattern I prefer is treating SRE as a role less than a team, and then the role can belong in each of your product teams, your DevOps teams, if you want to call them that. Centralized IT is quite popular in lots of organizations still. Particularly, I was chatting to someone the other day in finance and they want to do it because of regulation. A lot of people worry about things like segregation or separation of duties. But Dalibor, do you want to add your 2 pennies worth on?
Yeah, two pennies, 2 cents. Yes. I think the interesting thing here is that there is always this sort of cultural overlay in terms of where particular teams roll up. And I guess historically, there's this view that there's a team. And when I say where they roll up, I mean to the higher levels within the organizations. And you typically have this sort of accountability structure for, well, actually, you're responsible for the reliability of production, and you develop and operate on the infrastructure and things like that. And then the other parts are, well, you develop features, and then at some point there's this intermingling where you transfer that, and you have to, you know, what built has to go in the new world. I think it takes time for that incentive structure to do that. And I look at some of the larger organizations where ops, there's typically an operations manager or a, you know, you have a CTO that produces features, and then you have the CIO who often then is responsible for the overall data centers, the cloud environments and things like that. And I think because of that, the teams typically roll up to different budget centers, different cost centers and things like that. And that's why you typically see it split. But I totally agree that it has to come together. And I don't think that there's this view that you've got a DevOps team, that you've got a SRE team. I think that's kind of this adoption state that as people are bringing it on, they're almost prototyping the teams of the structure and the roles. But as it progresses and as it matures, it will just become, well, here's the delivery team. And these demarcations are more used to encapsulate the skill set required. So developers will have, you know, you're typically developing features, you're more interested in customer experience and things like that. Whereas when you then move to call it the SRE team, think of the SRE team as a SRE role and an SRE set of skills and what you've done in the past. And that will then include things like, how do you programmatically fix or build out the things that are being done on a regular basis. So I think it's an evolution thing. You know, I don't like the concept of DevOps teams as a team structure. I think it's that you have to bring it together. And I think SRE will be a role within this broader structure, and it will be cross-functional. It's a capability set that you need in order to achieve optimization for the delivery process. And one of the other comments here around, you know, people are asking for 5 years experience, 10 years experience, when, you know, I think in reality, some of these, the recruiters are disconnected in a lot of these technologies, where it's, you know, the hiring manager will say, I need 10 years of experience in this particular technology. the technology's only been around for 2 or 3 years. So it's it's one of those things that is just a recruitment anomaly. I remember, same thing was when I graduated college, and it was we need 6 years experience in Java, and it's like we're talking about a language that's been around for 2 years. So it's just a recruitment anomaly.
Yeah, seen that on different tech over the years. We also have platform teams, of course, as well, which I think the SRE role is particularly suited for as well, where we're doing things like self-service. But maybe they could be value stream teams in the future. So let's talk about VSM. The audience are champing at the bit. We've got a question: how does ITSM relate or not to SRE VSM? We are getting to that. But let's talk about VSM. So another participant is also talking about how, think that some of these conversations have been going on for years, right? I mean, Agile's been around a long time, Lean's been around even longer, and elements of value stream management have been around for a long time as well. Materials and information flow out of Toyota in the 1950s, Lean in manufacturing for many, many years now. But there is a new breed of value stream management, and this is different from mapping. Things have changed, and it's really digital transformation that has made things change. So digital transformation triggered DevOps, and we started using value stream mapping in DevOps as a kind of enabler, as setting the ground, helping us build investment cases, helping us set a roadmap for the journey ahead of us. But more recently, what we've evolved in the DevOps toolchain has given us the opportunity to access data about the value stream in a way that we just simply haven't been able to in the digital world. So Forrester, in their 2018, I think it was, original report, came up with this definition. And the point that they're making here that's really different from what we've seen before is the heterogeneous software delivery pipelines part of it. If you took that bit out, it could have been what we were talking about value stream management in the 1990s with James Martin's great transition book, for example. But Dalibor, what is different about VSM than was, say, 10 years ago?
Well, I think 10 years ago, people were asking, well, what is it? And I think now there's a bit more of an accepted understanding that it needs to be part of a strategy within organizations to deliver faster. When we think about it 10 years ago, when we started out, there was a lot, I'd say the delivery process was a lot more manual. There was a lot more siloed teams. There were this concept of centers of excellence. What we also found with customers sort of a long time ago was centers of excellence, command and control structures, and a high degree of centralizations. And that would be, we've got a tower around quality or a tower around test. We've got a tower around delivery. We've got some outsourcing that happens, and we've got an infrastructure team. I think all of that is starting to really collapse, and we're moving, it's collapsed a while ago, and we're moving very much to cross-functional, product-centric teams that incorporate a range of different skill sets and capabilities, and those cross-functional teams then need to be optimized, and the grouping structure is around products or assets that deliver value to the end customer. So what is it that you actually need to assemble in that cross-functional team to be successful? And value stream management gives you strong visibility to optimize that entire flow from idea to hands of the customer.
Lovely. So quite different from what we've been able to do before. Let's have our first poll today. So I'm going to start polling now. So you should be able to answer this question, which is, which of these practices do you currently have in your organization? So your choices are ITSM, SRE, VSM, Agile, DevOps, and DevSecOps. So we're starting to see some votes coming through now. One of the comments in the chat was about this technobabble, this jargon. We do have a lot of buzzwords in this industry, don't we, Dalibor? But I always have this concept of standing on the shoulder of giants, and there's no such thing as original thought. We are evolving. I think we're moving forward, but there's a lot of different streams and thought processes that people are going through. What do you think? Do we have too much technobabble, too many buzzwords, Dalibor? And if so, what do we do about it?
Well, I think the thing is, it's if you think about it as ultimately what you're trying to do is, people are coming up with great ideas, and you want to put those great ideas in the hands of the customer as capabilities or features. and there's a range of activities that happen in between. And fundamentally, the way that we have to interact with each other in an enterprise or a company is really break down the things that prevent us from doing that, and work in a way that is culturally going to deliver that as quickly as possible. The different disciplines and the buzzwords that come into it are different ways of basically ways of picking up and focusing the attention on particular hotspots within that area. And I think when you look at it, we've got this quiz. What's the uptake? So Agile was the first one, and it was, well, actually this waterfall sort of unified process where you've got a lot of different things in there, where you've got these really tight handoffs and clear demarcation between roles, doesn't necessarily work. So let's focus on that piece. Then it was, well, we've got this operational piece where we need to look at putting more structure around how we release and how we operate problem incident change. How do we implement these ITIL processes to put more structure around that piece? So then those two silos build up quite well. So I think it's just, what's the label given to the next piece of local optimization that we need to do? And site reliability engineering, SRE, is one of those things which is now, okay, we're shifting left from an operational construct, those service management concepts, in terms of how do we optimize those further. We need to put a programmatic approach around that and think about that as a development sort of focus area. How do we fix that? And then value stream management is, again, how do we think about that end-to-end piece? So I think a lot of it is just value stream management is the encapsulation of all those things, but then how do you target particular things? And there's got to be a buzzword around it to encapsulate what we mean by that. And ultimately, what that means, though, is that we're still doing the same thing. How do you optimize that piece? How do you make people work together? How do you eliminate waste? Those things still apply.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and close that poll, and we can have a look or a walk through some of the results. So as you said, we're indicated Agile, kind of been around quite a long time. Most of the audience have got that. That's the most popular answer. Next, DevOps. Surprisingly, then next, with only 18% ITSM, I was kind of imagining that we'd have equivalent Agile and ITSM there as per that first kind of diagram that we showed today. SRE, 13% of people on the call, or I shouldn't say that because it was a multi-select answer. 13% of the answers overall were SRE, and then VSM was 10% with DevSecOps at 8%. So VSM very much emerging, as we established, like 3 or 4 years old at the moment. Agile 30. I guess, was there anything in there a surprise for you, Dalibor?
No, I think that's consistent. I would say sort of Agile, ITSM, and then you move into VSM, SRE, kind of similar age. But the other one that I'd say, the DevSecOps part, is the thing that's been left out for quite some time is the security piece. And it's absolutely critical to make sure that it's not just left to the last minute. You do your penetration testing, you do your security tests at the last minute. That has to be injected all the way up into the design process to make sure that security is considered all the way throughout. So I would say that that's an area where we are definitely seeing a lot more growth to incorporate that as part of the value stream as well.
Let's have a look more closely at what our SREs are doing then. So this is from the 2021 State of SRE reports. This is an activity breakdown. So what you're seeing is the not applicable is the pale blue, and then we've got major. This is a major thing, a moderate thing on the turquoise, and then the dark blue is a minor thing. So up the top there, the most major thing people are doing is responding to incidents or outages when they're an SRE. So Dalibor, which of these SRE activities relate to value stream management?
Well, I think that the question is which ones can we eliminate or help or or look at? And I think definitely the first one, responding to incidents and outages. Obviously, the mantra, the objective of value stream management is to help organizations with higher quality lower incidence, greater transparency, and greater throughput. So these incidents that are introduced, if you increase the quality of the process, you increase the quality of the output. So definitely that responding to incidents is something that's highly related. And then the other one is the development of the application and capabilities. I think this gives the SREs a lot more ability to get involved in the programming activities for upstream to make sure that whatever they're releasing and those activities that are happening on a regular basis, that needs to be automated, and you need to take that sort of programming approach to those items. So that's definitely another one. And I'd say the third one will probably be planning and releasing roadmaps. That's a kind of a core capability within value stream management around understanding the flow and the realization, and that planning part of it, mapping out exactly what that plan looks like, what's the flow that you go through. That certainly helps. So I'd say those three areas are absolutely key.
And then people are very keen to get us onto the core topics today about the relationship between ITSM and SRE and VSM. So let's look at this in a slightly different way. Which of these activities are not typical activities for ITSM is my first question. And I'm looking at developing applications or capabilities and saying that's something that traditional ITSM hasn't done. Other than that,
yeah, I think, I mean, the other one is, when you're looking at the authoring business processes, rules, and best practices, I think typically that gets done at the operational sense. So you own the operational processes, but the business processes typically is not the domain of the service management. With, other than the service management is typically the implementation of the ITIL processes. So I'd see it from that perspective is something that doesn't happen that often.
Another thing that I think is slightly different we've got an SRE planning release roadmaps, and of course in ITSM we do release management, but it's big and chunky. But once we've broken things down and making things incremental and shifted left, that release process becomes much more accessible to everybody in the team. So there is an argument to say that SRE is the modern implementation of ITSM. And when you look at activity breakdowns like this, I think it's easy to see that we could wholesale replace what we have called ITSM with SRE. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a different approach, Helen, because I think when we think about, when I traditionally think about service management, I think of, okay, here is the ITIL processes. And when I think of service management, it's typically the service management, practically it's the service management module of ServiceNow or equivalent, and it's change, problem, incident, release, those type of capabilities that you have there. And there's not a major focus on how do you inject programmers, developers, an optimization approach around the things that are done on a regular basis, not just in the last mile, but further upstream, so that you know exactly what you're not just receiving, but you're participating in that process. So it's quite a shift. It's not just a shift left, but it's a change in what in the nature of the activities to be. How do I optimize the day-to-day, and how do I think about it with a developer mindset rather than just a recipient mindset?
Let's look at it in a bit more detail in this way as well. So this is the SRE Blueprint from Devops Institute. And what you're seeing here is that SDLC end-to-end. So you're seeing some things like Dalibor said that are different. So things that typically didn't exist in the old ITSM world, like continuous integration and continuous delivery and deployment. We're seeing things like SLAs, SLOs, SLIs that we talked about. So obviously ITSM has had service level agreements forever, but they haven't really had service level objectives and indicators. This is a very SRE driven approach, along with things like the error budgets. There are things on here like observability, which is a fairly new concept, which has really been driven by distributed computing. Things like chaos engineering are quite new approaches as well that we've only been able to do once we've got a certain amount of reliability. We've got the kind of dark launches in deployments as well. So our things like our canary releases and our blue-green deployments. So Which of these topics in particular then, Dalibor, would you point at to be VSM specific?
Yeah, I think VSM specific and related. Certainly the when you think about VSM, you always think about elimination of waste and think about optimization. So certainly the toil reduction part of it in terms of how do you reduce the non-value add activities? How do you reduce the slack in the end-to-end process? So I think that's definitely something where you'd say value stream management helps you prioritize the things that don't add value occurring on a repetitive basis, and how do you solve for that? I think the other piece is then around the work sharing part and managing the distribution of work, breaking down the silos there. So that's definitely another one. And then the deployment part of it is looking at that last mile, but shifting, understanding when you actually deploy, how do you do that in a way that requires a bit more automation? So you're automating particular things, so then it's not necessarily just the deployment side of it. It's the development of the capability that allows you to deploy on a automated basis. So I think that's the other piece of the puzzle. And then probably to a lesser extent, I'd say, just as important is the measurement part. I think that whilst the metrics are different, I think having that telemetry so that you can tie that back to, is value being delivered? Are we changing things? Has this resulted? Providing that closed feedback loop, I think, is important as well.
Telemetry everywhere. So they've got instant management on that slide, but I'm going to go to another very quick poll, which is instant management related. So that is starting now. And the question for the audience is, do you think that instant management is a value stream? Yes or no, or other? But if you put other, please do put a comment in the chat as well, so we know your opinion on that. So we've got a yes. Anyone else want to put a little vote in? So taking a little while. Oh, we've got quite a few now. Okay, so we're getting a lot of yeses and no no's as yet, and no others either. So, few no's have just come in. So about 70-30 on the percentages at the moment. I'm going to close that. That was pretty interesting. One of the things, we've got 67-25% now, and one other person that put other. Don't forget to put your comment in the chat for that one, but I'm going to close that poll. Thank you very much, guys, for contributing to that. One of the things we do at the Value Stream Management Consortium that I mentioned at the start of this call is we quite often, we've got like a blog series, and we do a value stream, and we did one fairly recently called Instant Management. Is instant management a value stream? And myself, one of our board advisors, Steve Pereira, and one of our influence members, Patrice Corbard, we normally answer these together. So the three of us put our 2 pennies or 2 cents within about what we think about this. And in this blog post, we kind of all said that it's not a value stream. But what we did say is that it supports the core value stream. Potentially, we could call that a supporting value stream. Patrice also likes this idea of calling it a value streamlet. And it isn't really a value stream in that it doesn't create value for the customer, but it is this supporting thing. And actually, even though it doesn't generate its own value, there are loads of value stream management principles that we can use to optimize it. So that was our view. You can go and read the blog. You can find it at vsmconsortium.org. In fact, I'll put the little link in the chat. But Dalibor, where does instant management fit into VSM for you?
I think incident management is typically, it's a standard flow in that you need to account for it, but it is, like you said, the value to the end customer, it's more of an exception flow in that something hasn't fundamentally gone the way that you've wanted to. So it's a remediation flow. It's a remediation flow for something. So when you look at the value stream, I think the tie-in for us is when you then look at the post-implementation reviews and other things, the incident data should be feeding back into your value stream and influencing the value stream that you're running. But this, I like the, whether it's a value streamlet, a supporting value stream, that's the way I would say it makes sense, because value to the customer is critical. But let's not forget the data that comes back from the aggregate incident data that you can then use to inform subsequent value streams to continue the optimization process.
Fabulous. So SREs do a lot of incident management. Incident management may not be a value stream in its classic definition, but it's certainly essential to making our value streams operate well. So let's look at this another way as well. So SREs are, they power innovation, basically. So innovation means that value creation. So by reducing the incidence of unplanned work and the time that's needed to deal with it, the SREs actually release more time for the teams themselves to spend on value creation and learning, which is an essential competitive element of any organization, is having that continuous mastery. And they're able to spend more time, is what you're seeing here, spend more time paying down technical debt. So it's a virtuous circle. So how can teams see these different types of work and manage them, Dalibor?
Well, I think one of the key things is you've got to, the instrumentation is absolutely critical. And I have this conversation with even our team, and we're in this space and we're constantly looking at, well, how do we optimize and deliver the maximum value to our customer base? And it's always, you always find yourself delivering less than you expected because of this unplanned work. And it is a significant problem in the inefficiency. But the real question is, okay, do you know, first thing would be, is it measured? Is it monitored? Do you know what that unplanned work is? And then the other part that we kind of have to go through then is, okay, how do you prioritize that sort of solving, typically with development resource, the unplanned work, so that you might take a short-term hit in terms of the development work that needs to be done now to eliminate that unplanned work, to make your process more efficient, whether that's automation in particular areas. It does require a bit more investment up front, but then you yield longer term gains. If you don't solve it, then you find that unplanned work just keeps growing and growing and growing, and you end up on the left-hand side where you're just shrinking the value created, and the burden of optimizing and fixing it becomes a lot bigger. So you have to allocate the appropriate resource, and that's why when we think about SRE, we think about that as more of a developer mindset, a developer skill set. About half the time spent on development, half the time spent on kind of operating the environment. But that development piece has to go to, how do you solve for this unplanned work programmatically?
Absolutely. So let's have a little look at some more from the State of SRE Report 2021. And these are successful SRE implementation drivers that we're talking about here. So they all relate to value stream management in some way. They're all concerned with speed and therefore directly impact flow. Two of them relate specifically to metrics. So we've got mean time to discover and mean time to recover in terms of how quickly we can do things like root cause incident analysis. And then we've got lead time and deployment frequency, effectively, when we talk about how quickly we can push product updates. But in your opinion, Dalibor, which of these metrics really matter to VSM and why?
Well, I think the key thing is, how do you, so when you think about what's important to VSM is minimizing the cycle time, making sure that your cycle time is as quick as possible, making sure that any slack in the system is eliminated. So when I think about this, I'd say 41%. How quickly do you do your root cause analysis? So that the more that you can cycle through, the better. How quickly do we push product updates? Think about that as if you're doing that at twice the speed of what another company is, then you're getting twice the feedback every single time. And that feedback is absolutely critical. So it's, in order to be agile and not just agile in the sense of, okay, we're doing agile processes, but for the company to be truly agile, the cycle time that you can get to by getting twice the amount of feedback, 5 times, 10 times the amount of feedback from the customer is absolutely key. So that how quickly do you push updates? How quickly do you do your root cause analysis? the faster that you can get through that process, the stronger you're going to end up.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at our third and final poll for today. So earlier on, we had 10% of the audience saying that they were doing VSM, or that was one of the things that was happening in their organisation. Now we're going to ask a slightly different question, which is your team or organisation practicing VSM? So your options are: my team is, my organisation is, we're just starting, we're thinking about it, we've done some value stream mapping, no, just a plain no, but also no, I hadn't heard of it before today. So you can pile into the poll now and pop your answers in there. That would be great. Participant 356 has put in the Formula One tyre change. I used to love watching that years ago. Do you remember they used to take like 30 seconds, and now I've got good ones about 2.7 seconds. I've got into, like so many people, Formula One since the Netflix Drive to Survive series was on. You a Formula One fan, Dalibor?
I am.
Who's your favourite driver?
The Australian. So
Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, of course.
He's very funny.
Yeah, he's very charismatic. He's great in the series as well.
Yeah, he's wonderful. Good. So our guys have been piling into our polls. So what have we got? We have got 29% thinking about it. That's our top scoring answer out of that lot. And then at 21%, the no, we haven't heard of it before today. We're just starting at 14%, and then 14% have also done some value stream mapping, and then 7% across my team is, my organisation is, a no. So quite a spread across that, but good to see we're thinking about it. So hopefully after this webinar, you'll be not thinking about it anymore, but doing it. Maybe it'd be great. Gives you some tips at the end on how to get started. So let's talk about Vsm Domains. So this is from the Value Stream Management Consortium, and this is how we think about Vsm having these two domains. One is about flow. So we've been talking about this a lot, and how to optimize the way that we get things to the customer. So it's about the outputs and the health of our value stream. And then on the other side is the kind of the concept part, if you like, or the cash part of the concept to cash, the ideation to realization. So the realization element is about the outcomes in terms of customer experience. So is value generated in the eyes of the customer primarily? We can look at value through different eyes, but how can SREs, Dalibor, help teams balance both of these VSM domains as they implement value stream management?
Well, I think it definitely starts on the left side with the flow, right? So it's about when we think about SRE, we think about it as how do you apply a development approach to operational reliability, and how do you provide a development approach to the transition stages of getting applications into the hands of customers. So eliminating any manual tasks within that is a kind of core value stream management premise. So when you think about that, cycle time, flow velocity, the efficiency, all of those things is where it certainly fits in. And like I said before, if you can reduce the cycle time, the amount of feedback that you get then drives the realization part, because you've basically given your business twice, 3 times, 10 times the number of data points that they need from the customer. Because if you're releasing, worst case, you're releasing 4 times a year, you've got these quarterly feature capability sets that go out to the customer. When that goes out to the customer, it takes you a quarter to make any iteration to that or change that. If you can put that into a weekly, daily, depending on the size and nature of your business and what your customer expects, you've significantly increased the amount of feedback that you get through your telemetry, so that the realization points are significantly higher. So they're the two areas, but it's driven from the flow part, because that's where you're reducing the cycle time. And if you can reduce that cycle time, then you've got the ability to inject far more feedback into that journey, so your realization is certainly higher.
Absolutely. I think it's such an important point that we're so used to in our industry of justifying investment and taking time to do things in terms of productivity improvements and saving money. But actually with DevOps and with VSM, what we're actually saying is what you're doing is you're injecting more capacity into the system so you can deliver more and more and more and keep your customer happier and happier and happier. And I think that's hard for an industry that comes from a place where we started treating our technology teams basically as order takers and cost centers, and it requires quite a shift in mindset. So our last slide today from the State of SRE report, there's a new one coming out shortly, by the way, but it wasn't released in time for today. But this one is telling us about where all this toil is coming from. So which of these causes of toil most directly relates or aligns with what we're dealing with in value stream management, do you think?
Look, I think the top three, technical debt is an interesting one because I think that's often a function of prioritization, and you leave it too long because it's like a home loan, right? You're not paying off the principal, you're only paying the interest, and that becomes at some point too big, and then you're doing a whole bunch of manual work. So I think understanding that is key. But then I'd say that the next two, where you've got priorities and goals are not aligned, the value stream flow, because you've got that feedback loop from the realization and you've got the telemetry all the way through, it certainly helps you understand that. And then the third one, obviously going into the business value, that's another one. So I think for a lot of these here, that understanding and surfacing where those challenges are then allows you to pinpoint into a particular area of the value stream where it needs to be resolved. And that's with SRE targeting a sort of a development approach to thinking about the operational environment much further upstream and automating a lot of the activities that you can do to provide that reliability as part of the development process. I think a lot of these items are certainly addressed.
Wonderful. So our attempt to put all of this together to answer the person and the people actually that were like, well, how do these things look together? Where are the boundaries, Dalibor?
Yeah, that's I'm a visual sort of person, and I always try to think, well, you have to understand the boundaries of certain things because the boundaries actually then define the accountabilities, the structures, and in particular in large organizations, they define alliances, allegiances, and being able to understand that and navigate that is key. So the way that we think about it is value stream management is the end-to-end meta model of how do you get from idea to cash. There's two parts to it. It really gives you a really good view of optimizing for flow, which is how do I do it as quickly as possible and eliminate any sort of slack in the system to do so. So that's one part of value stream. The other part is the realization part, is when you're actually putting it in the hands of the customer. Are you doing the right things? And is that delivering the maximum amount of value to the customer? So you're optimizing the flow and you're optimizing what you're actually delivering. And then underpinning that, you've got, okay, how do you practically implement that and do the activities to do that? Starts with, okay, there's a development set of structures, there's an operational set of structures. They're coming together through DevOps in particular, and then the operational side, you've got service management, which is typically trying to shift left, and agile, which is trying to blend that together. So whilst there's not necessarily a hard line between agile or development and ops and agile and ITSM, I think that the more concrete processes become blended together. And then as you look at that real interface between the agile work practices and service management, the CI/CD capability is even more concrete. And then you get into SRE, and it's, okay, well, how do I get even more concrete and get sort of the practical development activities that need to be done to eliminate this technical debt, provide the level of automation so that when I actually put something into the operational environment, it's performing the way that it needs to deliver value. So think of these as kind of, the axes here are the breadth of the process that you're dealing with, and the level of abstraction in terms of how far are you away from the bits and the bytes that are actually interacting with the code. That's typically how I think about this this structure.
And here is Value Stream, but as a continuous loop in this one, so not our linear A to B one, but recognizing that we're going round and around it. So we've just got the 5 steps on this abstraction. So we've got our portfolio and backlog, and then our continuous integration, our testing, and then our release basically into live, and then our gathering of feedback through monitoring and observability. So where does an SRE get involved here?
I take a simple approach and say, and I think I've said it a few times, that if you're taking a programmatic approach to reliability, then anything that's done continuously needs to be robust and needs to be codified. So when I take that view of the world, I'd say, well, anywhere where you've got continuous delivery, how does that continuous delivery piece tie into someone who's providing reliability to the operational environment? Similarly, whilst testing is there, how do you make sure, if testing is being done continually through some battery of tests that are automated, how do you make sure that that's plugged in? And then the integration part with the artifacts for the verification part is the other part. So anything that's done continuously, it needs to be codified and have a programmatic approach to an operational context. But I think that maybe we open up because the insight and analytics is also important to provide visibility to the broader team.
Okay, so which of these challenges then does an SRE really care about?
Well, I think it's I'd say it's all of these. So these are the challenges that Value Stream Management solves, and I think they're relevant to understand from an SRE perspective as well. So if we look at the 4 challenges that we solve as a business and Value Stream Management solves, the core challenge that we see in the environments right now is there's a lot of fragmentation. It's not like you're dealing with one pipeline. It's highly fragmented. So the SREs need to understand, okay, we're not just dealing with a single code base, single line of code, single technology. It's a really heterogeneous environment that we're dealing with. So how do you work with that environment, and how do you make that reliable? How do you try to reduce complexity, but also reduce the amount of automated activity that occurs? The next one is all around visibility. So if you can't see it and you've got these silos, it's very, very difficult to understand how that ties in. So providing visibility across teams, across those silos, understanding what they're doing, understanding those interactions is absolutely critical. I think the next thing would be not every company, given the size of companies that we work with, every company has teams that are operating in a slightly different way, different methodologies, and as a result of that, you kind of the way that you do things in one team is slightly different to the way that you do things in another team. So you try to standardize as much as possible without constraining the creativity that teams have. So that level of methodology standardization, I think, plays to how much repeatability that you can put into the system to optimize. And the other one is if you don't really follow a process and it's really ad hoc, it's really hard to improve. You need to define a process, you need to measure it, and then you need that continuous feedback back so that you can then continue to optimize. So these are sort of 4 key challenges that we continue to deal with within most of our customers, and I say they resonate with a lot of people on the call here.
And to finish us off, here's the platform itself. So how in particular does this help SREs?
Yeah, so I think for SREs, we'll start at the bottom, and at the bottom you'll see all the different things that are typically touched to get code into the hands of the customers. There's typically, starting on the left-hand side, some type of planning capability, prioritization activity, and then you end up with, okay, it's in a production environment and it's monitored, and there's a range of different things that an idea goes through to get it into the hands of the customer, and these are typically siloed. We plug into that, so there's a common model that ties together key information from all the different silos that you go through to get something into an operational environment. So we normalize that. We provide that through a comprehensive integration framework. Goes into a common data model, and then there's an orchestration and management layer in the middle, which really defines what good looks like. So think of that as almost the Schwarzenegger governator, where it's like what's good, what are the metrics that you use, how do you define the boundaries of what's acceptable or not, and then the top part is the decision-making layer. So 3-layer cake: integration and data, orchestration in the middle, and then the decision-making that predictively tells you what's working, what's not working, where are you likely to see errors, and all the flow data that we've been talking about is surfaced to the user. So when you log in the morning as a user of the platform, you know exactly where you've got problems with the value stream.
Awesome. So to finish us off, let's talk about the key takeaways. We think it's time that site reliability engineers embrace value stream management. Hopefully we've explained where the relationship lies and how they can benefit today. SRE are ITOps, and ITOps is part of VSM. So they're either part of a core or a supporting value stream. SREs have an opportunity to prioritize their work according to flow. So we know that destroying toil helps as technical debt stifles flow, and there's lots of other ways that SREs are naturally helping value stream management emerge and evolve. And finally, customer experience, that value realization, is driven by the SLAs, the SLIs, the SLOs. So it's all very tightly entwined. A final word from you, Dalibor, and then we shall bid goodbye to the audience today.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think one of the things that was mentioned earlier was the buzzwords, right? So, whether it's SRE, whether it's ITSM, I think about that as capabilities and skills that need to work together to get from idea to operations. And there'll be new buzzwords for particular optimization problems that come along the way, but fundamentally, the objective is very, very similar. We're trying to get idea to the hands of the customer as quickly as possible. And as we optimize, we'll be looking at different things, and they're typically not competitive. They're quite collaborative and work together.
Wonderful. Thank you, audience. You've been awesome. Thank you, Dalibor. You have also been awesome. We'll say goodbye for now.
Thanks, Helen. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, that was outstanding. I also want to thank you, Helen and Dalibor, for taking the time to join the discussion, share expertise with us. Just a quick reminder for everybody, today's session was recorded. Following the panel, you'll receive an email with a link to download to view the recording for the on-demand. You can also check out the recording on the devops.com website. We look forward to seeing you there. But real quick, I'd like to announce our 4 gift card winners. We've got Tan M, David V, Ann R, Michelle P. Congratulations to the 4 of you. Please keep an eye out in your inbox or your spam. If you don't receive an email, just keep waiting for it. It should be coming here pretty shortly. Helen, Dalibor, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I wish we had some time for some final remarks if you had any more. I'd like to, again, thank Plutora for sponsoring today's webinar, and thank each of you, our audience, for being with us for the entirety of the presentation. Please take a moment to fill out our post survey as soon as we close out of here, and tell us any of your final thoughts. Thank you again. Have a great day, and I am signing out.